How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed Aleph? Yeah, Daf Lamed Aleph. Masechta BavaBasra, friends. Yeah, alright. I mean, it's just like kind of some BavaBasra kind of stuff. Cheskas Sabatim. For the next few days, I think like the stopping points are going to be like a little funny. So I think we're going to stop only about like a third or so down Lamed Aleph Lamed Beis, and then I don't know, we'll also about halfway through Lamed Beis tomorrow. And anyways, yeah, I think the stopping points are going to be a little funny, but we like funny. All right, here we go. We're going to start Daf Lamed Aleph on the first line of the Daf. Ze Omer Shel Avosai, and we're going to read it with the Gos Abach. Ze Omer Shel Avosai ve'achalta shnei chazoko v'ze Omer Shel Avosai Baram. So Ruvain says, this property, it belonged to my father, and not only that, I've also been here for 3 years, and nobody said anything to me. Shimon says, this field that you're talking about, it belonged to my father. Okay. Hi, I see Sadi de Avosai. So Shimon brings witnesses that the field was his father's. And Reuven brings witnesses that he has been there for the past 3 years and nobody's given him a hard time. Okay, so fine. So Rabba says Rabba. Malo lishaker. So Rabba says we trust Reuven. Reuven, who has the witnesses for that he's been there for 3 years, nobody's given him a hard time. We award him the field, even though Shimon, right, we give it to Reuven, who has the Eidei Chazaka, even though Shimon has witnesses that said that it was his father's field. Because Rabbi says, Malo l'shaker. Why should Reuven lie if Reuven has the Eidei Chazaka? So we say that he must be telling the truth. Because Ibai, if he was lying, he could, Amalei could say to Shimon, if he was lying, he already has the Eidei Chazaka, he has the witnesses that he was there for 3 years, nobody gave him a hard time. If he was lying, you know what he would say? I bought it from you, and I've been here for 3 years, and here are my witnesses that I've been here for 3 years. And if he says that I bought it from you, and I've been here for 3 years, well, that's the classic Chazaka. I don't have a document, I lost the document, but I've been here for 3 years, you never gave me a hard time, it's mine. But, so if he was lying, he could have said that, but he didn't. Instead, he said right, that it's his father's and that he ate it for the Shnei Chazaka. So we trust him that he's telling the truth. Okay. Abai says to Rabba, one second, Rabba. Mali l'shaker b'makom eidim lo amrinon. We don't say Mali l'shaker against witnesses. Mali l'shaker is a svar. Mali l'shaker is a how do you say svar in English? Is a logical conclusion. It's logic. It's logical. It's not evidence based. It's logic based. We say, look, we don't know for sure that Reuven's telling the truth, but let's assume that he's telling the truth, because logically speaking, if he was lying, he would have said something else. But the thing is, that's a very nice svara, it's a very nice argument. But Shimon brought witnesses. What's going on over here? Reuven says that this field was my father's, and not only that, I've been here for the past 3 years and nobody gave me a hard time. Shimon says, this field that you say was your father's, it was my father's. Reuven brings witnesses of a chazaka. Shimon brings witnesses that it belonged to his father. Rabba wants to say that based on the svar of Mala l'shaker, we should trust Reuven when he says that it was his father's and that he's been there now and that he has Eidei Chazaka about it, and that it's not Shimon's father's. But Shimon has witnesses that it was his father. As we know, witnesses are everything. If you have witnesses, you win. A svara, an argument of Mali l'shaker against witnesses, mapitom, it's irrelevant. So Abai says, I don't get it. Rabbi, how could you say Mali l'shaker overrides Shimon's witnesses? So Hadar Amalei, so Rabbi says, well, it's talking about a scenario where Ruvain then said to Shimon, in Davosach hi vizabanto minayu. So says Ruvain, so it's talking about where Ruvain says to Shimon. So again, what initially happened? What initially happened? Initially, Ruvain had said, it was my father's property, and I've also been here for 3 years. Shimon said, that was Ruvain. Shimon says, it was my father's property. Ruvain brings the Edei Chazaka. Shimon brings the witnesses that it was his father's. Rabbi wanted to say Mala l'shaker. Abai says you can't because Shimon has witnesses. Says Rabbi, well, Ruvain then said, what did he say? Hadar Amalei, Reuven then said, let me clarify, because again, Shimon has witnesses that it belonged to his father. So Reuven says, let me clarify what I meant when I said that it was my father's. It wasn't actually my father's. In Davasochi, yes, it was your father's. Vizavanto minayu, but I bought it. I believe he's saying that he himself bought it. That Reuven says that he bought it from Shimon's father. So Reuven is not disputing that it belonged to Shimon's father, but he's saying that he bought it from Shimon's father, and now he has a chazaka on it. And the reason why I said that it's my father's, because it's so mine that it was as if it was my father's. Kilo, I bought it from your father. I've been here for 3 years. It's ki'ilu, it was my father's that he bequeathed to me. That's how mine it is. But Reuven admits that it's true. It was Shimon's father's. So the shaila is chosev v'toin v'chosev v'toin oin toin v'chosev v'toin. Can he do that? Is that like kosher? Is that allowed? Can Reuven first say that this field is my father's, was my father's, and I've already been on it for 3 years, and I have Edei Chazaka. And then, when Shimon brings witnesses that actually it was his father's, Reuven then kind of like clarifies, quote unquote, that, oh, yeah, when I said it was my father's, what I meant is that I bought it from, it was your father's, but I bought it from your father's. I bought it from your father, and now I've been here for 3 years. It is so mine, it's as if it was my father's. So, is that... One second. Okay. Okay. Where am I? So that's the shaila, right? Do we say toin v'chosev v'toin or not? Okay. So where am I? So Ula Amar toin v'chosev v'toin. Nadari Amrei Eino toin v'chosev v'toin. So Ula says, sure, that's no problem. It's okay for Reuven to initially say that it was his father's, and then to later clarify that what he meant by his father's is that it's his, that he bought it from Shimon's father, but that it's so right. Reuven views it as so much his that it was as if it was his father's. But then Nardari say, no, you can't do that. Well, once Reuven says that it was his father's, he can't just then say, oh no, really it wasn't actually my father's. Umodi Ula, now Ula, who says Toin v'chozer v'toin, does however have sort of boundaries for what's acceptable, for kind of what arguments can you clarify. That if Reuven were to have said, this property was mine, and it was my father's, and it was not your father's, well then he would not be able to say, okay, I admit that it was your father's. No, that would be just a straight up contradiction. If he initially said it was no way, no how Shimon's forefathers, and now he's saying, oh yeah, it was, just I treat it as if it was mine. No, that doesn't work. Additionally, when we say that Reuven could say that it was his father's, and then say it's as if it was his father's, that's so long as he's still in court, that all of this happens in the same court session. That he initially said that it was his father's, and then he clarified that what he meant was that it was as if it was his father's. But Beidina v'lo to'an, where am I? V'hecha dehava koi Beidina v'lo to'an. But if he was initially in Bezdin, and he said, and Reuven claims it was his father's, and he never did that clarification, and then they left for a recess, and he comes back and he says, oh, by the way, when I said it was my father's, I meant that it's as if it was my father's. Well, then, so in that case, we don't accept it, because my time at ta'anose agme, because basically they went out for a recess, and the people on his side, right there, his friends and family and advisors said, by the way, Reuven, you're in big trouble unless you can, clarify what you meant by saying that the field is your father's. After all, Shimon brought witnesses. So then he comes back into court and says, so his advisors advise him to say that, oh, no, really, it was Shimon's father's, but I bought it from him, and it says if it was my father's. So Kilu, if it's all within the same court session, so then Beseder, he's clarifying what he said. But if they, take a recess and then they come back and all of a sudden he's got this fancy explanation, we say, okay, something's fishy over here. Somebody was sort of coaching him. All right. Umodu Nardoi, and the Nardaeans, the Nardoi who say, Eino toin v'chozav toin. They admit, however, heichado amar le shel avosai shelikachu me'avosecha dechozav toin. So the Nardaeans agree, though, admit that if what Reuven says, so Reuven says it was my father's, and I've been there for 3 years and I have witnesses. Shimon says it was my father's, and he brings witnesses that it was his father's. Nardaeans agree that what Reuven would be able to do is to say, both, that's, the fact that it was Shimon's doesn't negate Shimon's father's, doesn't negate the fact that it was my father's too. My father bought it from Shimon's father. So those aren't mutually exclusive. So my father bought it from Shimon's father, and I'd been here for 3 years, and these are my Eidei Chazaka. So that would be acceptable, because it's not contradicting in any way. Ve'echa de ishtoi, it's just kind of like expanding and actually clarifying. Additionally, if Reuven made some kind of a claim outside of Bezdin, and he didn't make, this claim of, what does that say? Where am I? No, come on. Yeah. Wait, where am I? Right, okay, exactly. Right, so the Rashbam says even right. So Rashbam explains that what Nardaeans are saying is that if Reuven says one thing outside of court, and then in court, meaning prior to the case, and then in court he says mamish the opposite, that would be acceptable. In that case, he can be, technically towing v'chozav v'toin, even though, because the first claim was outside of court. And let's go weiter. Right, ve'hecha de'ishtoi mile avroi v'lotoin, that if Reuven, doesn't make this claim outside of court, ve'also the ve'dina v'toin, then he comes into court and he makes a completely, he does make this claim, or kilu, he basically says one thing outside of court and something completely different in court, the chozer v'toin, that would be acceptable. My time outcome of it inish to lo megali ta'anose el levedina, because that makes sense. It makes sense that Reuven would not be sort of making his arguments outside of court which is not an official forum and is a place where Shimon's supporters will be there and will be listening to what he's saying and making sort of strategies. If they find out anything, they're going to come up with strategies against him. So yeah, it makes sense why Reuven wouldn't sort of would even might maybe try to create a diversion outside of court or something. But what actually matters is what happens in court, right? So it's not a problem for him to say one thing outside of court and then something completely different in court, so long as he doesn't incriminate himself in front of witnesses outside of court or something like that. But it would be completely acceptable for him to say one thing outside of court and another thing inside of court, because people aren't people are not going to necessarily be making proper arguments outside of court where they can be sort of used in all sorts of schemes. Better save it for the court. And Amar Ameimer says, Ameimer says, look, I'm a Ne'ardayan. I'm from Ne'arda, V'svirali, and yet I hold to Toin V'chozer V'toin. I hold like Ula, that Toin V'chozer V'toin V'chsa Toin V'chozer V'toin, and the halacha taka is like Ula, Toin V'chozer V'toin. Okay. So now we get up to another interesting Gemara. Again, we have to read it with Agos Habach, or at least I'm going to read it with Agos Habach. Ze omer shel avosai ve'achalte shnei chazaka, ze omer shel avosai ve'achalte shnei chazaka. Both Reuven and Shimon make the same claim. This property was in my family, and I've been on it for 3 years, and nobody said anything to me. Both Reuven and Shimon make the same exact argument. So again, ze omer shel avosai ve'achalte shnei chazaka, ze omer shel avosai ve'achalte shnei chazaka. Hai aisi sadeh de avose ve'achola shnei chazaka. Reuven brings witnesses that the field was in fact in his family and that he's been there for 3 years. Nobody's given him a hard time. That is a chazaka. And Shimon, v'hai aisi sadeh, and Shimon brings witnesses de achla shnei chazaka, that Shimon has been there for 3 years and has a chazaka. Okay, so both are making the same claim, which is that it was in their family and that they've been there for 3 years, that they've made a chazaka. Now Reuven brings witnesses on the entire claim, both that it was in his family as well as that he has a chazaka. Shimon only brings witnesses about the chazaka, but not about it belonging to his fathers. So Amr Rav Nachman says, Rav Nachman, Uki achila levade achila. Rav Nachman says, well, look, we have conflicting testimonies about the chazaka. Right, Reuven has witnesses that he has a chazaka. Shimon has witnesses that he has a chazaka. So those witnesses cancel themselves out. What are we left with? Reuven brought witnesses that I just distracted myself. The whole day I've been distracting myself. Reuven brought witnesses that the field belonged to his father. Yeah, I think technically it says forefathers, plural. Okay. I'm just going to say father. I hope it's okay. Anyways, so Reuven brought witnesses that it belonged to his father and that he has a chazaka. Shimon only brought witnesses, even though he claimed that it belonged to his father and that he has a chazaka, but he only brought witnesses that he has a chazaka. So the two chazaka testimonies cancel each other out. Says Rav Nachman, what are you left with? Reuven's witnesses' testimony that it belonged to Reuven's father. So it belongs to Reuven because he has the witnesses that it belonged to his father. Omar le Rava says to Rav Nachman, V'ha edus makchashas hi. But this is contradictory testimony. Rava says to Rav Nachman, wait up. One of these groups is definitely lying, right? Meaning, how could it be that Reuven and Shimon were both on the same land for the past 3 years and, nobody had said anything to the other, that they were both there exclusively? One of them is clearly lying. It's entire, we don't know which one, right? They're contradicting each other. One of them, right. One of them's lying. We don't know which one. It could very well be that Reuven's witnesses are the liars. So why would we trust them to testify that it was Reuven's fathers? Right? So again, Amalei Rava says to Rav Nachman, Va'edus mukhashasi. This is contradicted testimonies. One of these groups are liars. So how could we trust Reuven's witnesses to testify that the field was his father's? So Rav Nachman responds to Rav, look, sure, they were contradicted with regard to the chazaka, sure, but that's not what I'm talking about. There was no contradiction about the testimony that it belonged to Reuven's father. Nobody contested that. So sure, the testimony about the chazakas canceled each other out, but we could still accept the testimony that it belonged to Reuven's father. These Gemaras are so funny. I don't know. They're like they're requiring a lot of koiches, as if Kilo is in Shnai Melchus and Betalis. I don't know. That was way harder. But the whole Rashbam dynamic makes it very funny. Because the Gemaras feel kind of short, and it's not very long. But they really do require you to use your brain. But it's definitely not any more difficult than anything we've seen before. But there's moving pieces over here. Okay, so Lema Rava Rav Nachman beplugte to Rav Huna Rav Chizda kemiflige. So let's say that I'm borderline mush. Not mush, I'm not mush, but I'm that's the thing. My brain is working hard enough that I could see it getting mushy eventually. So let's say that this machlokes is between Rav Nachman and Rabbah. Rav Nachman, who says that sure they were contradicted about the chazaka, but we could still trust them about the fathers. And Rava, who says that, what do you mean? The whole testimony needs to be thrown away, is like the machlokas between Rav Huna and Rav Chizda. Deitmar was stated, Beis Kite Edim Hamakrisho Zo Ezo. So if you have two groups of witnesses and they contradict one another, they contradict each other. So therefore we can't trust them. We don't know which one to trust. So Rav Huna says, look, granted, we can't trust their testimony in this case because they're contradicted. But say, one group of witnesses wants to go and testify in a different case, that's fine. Nobody's contradicting them there, right? They're not inherently flagged. Yeah, we can't trust them in this case because they're contradicted, but they're not. We don't know for sure that they're liars. They could be the good guys. So while they can't be trusted in this case because they're contradicted, they can be trusted in another case. Rav Chizda Omar, Ba'adei Sadei Shakri Lomali. Rav Chizda says, no. If they're contradicted, that means that there's something bad going on here. We can't trust them in other cases until we figure out which group is the innocent, right? Which group is the good guys, and which one is the bad guys. So Leimer Rav Nachman Domer Rav Huna Rav Chizda. So let's say that Rav Nachman, who says that sure they were contradicted by the chazaka, but we could trust them by the father, is like Rav Huna, who says that these witnesses are not admissible for this case, but they can give testimony in a different case. And Rava, who says these are problematic witnesses, should be like Rav Chizda, who says that Ba'adei Sadei Shakri Lomali. And for the Gemara lo nisht. Ali b'du Rav Chizda kuli amaloi plige. Okay, so with regard to Rav Chizda, yeah, so that's pretty clear, right? Rav Chizda, who says Ba'adei Sadei Shakri Lomali, clearly Rav Nachman cannot hold like Rav Chizda. Clearly Rav Nachman, who says that even though they're contradicted about the chazaka, they could still be trusted to testify that it belonged to his father, to Reuven's father. Okay, clearly Rav Chizda would not hold like Rav Nachman, and if we're lining up this machlokas, that would be like Rav. Okay, fine. So Alibud Rav Chizda, where am I? So lo Alibud Rav Chizda kule amalo plige, ki plige, but where they would argue would be with regard to Rav Huna's position. Right? Initially we wanted to say that Rav Nachman, who says that we can't trust him with regard to the chazaka, but we can trust him with regard to the saying that it was Reuven's father's, would be like Rav Huna, who said that they are not trusted in this case when you have contradictory testimony. So they're not trusted in this case, but they could testify in other cases. So we wanted to say that Rav Nachman and Rav Huna are aligned. and that Rava would not be like Rav Nachman, but Rava would disagree. Rava would not be like Rav Huna, but Rava would disagree and say, yeah, obviously Rav Chizda would agree with what I'm saying, that if they're contradicted for the chazaka, then they're inadmissible for it to testify that it's Reuven's father's. And obviously Rav Chizda, who says obviously would agree with that. But Rava then argues though that Rav Huna though would also agree with me. Because granted Rav Huna said that if you have witnesses that are contradictory witnesses in one case, they could testify in another case. But Rav Huna said, but our case is talking about where these witnesses were contradicted in the same exact case that Rav Nachman wants to trust them in. They said, right, Reuven's witnesses said that the field belonged to his father and that he had a chazakah, which contradicts Shimon's witnesses who say that their client has a chazakah. So they're being disqualified in this very case with regard to chazakah. Rava would argue that Rav Huna would say that in such a case, these witnesses need to be thrown away, not like Rav Nachman. So obviously Rav Nachman is going to hold like Rav Huna to say that the witnesses are admissible in another area. But Rava, who we wanted to say is like only like Rav Chizda, but he would argue that no, Rav Huna would agree with him as well. Because when Rav Huna says that contradicted witnesses can testify in a different case, so they can testify, fine, that's beseder. But not for the same exact testimony, right? In this case, they were contradicted within the same exact testimony with regard to the chazakah. We can't now trust them with regard to a different part of that same testimony, which is that it belonged to Reuven's father. Chevra, we're going to stop here. It's a little bit high up. First of all, we have to earn these gemaras, huh? Yeah, it says, requires as much kochas as any other gemara. The thing is that the pages are smaller. As I said, these are going to be smaller pages. So they don't, especially if you leave 2/3 of the Amud undone. But it's just not such great start. There's like the next few days, there's like funny stopping points. So we're going to stop here and then tomorrow we'll stop on Lamed Beis about halfway through. But, alright, again, it was some more, we had actually some interesting sugyas here about Toin v'chozer v'toin, Machlokas Ula, and the Nardoi. It sounds like we say that Toin v'chozer v'toin. We saw the Machlokas between Rav Nachman and Rava about what happens if can contradicted Eidim, witnesses, testify about something else. We saw the Machlokas of Nachman and Rava, Rav Huna, and Rav Chizda. Very interesting. Peace out.